all my flaws, all my downs, and still wanna stay around.
Alright, so let's take a look at how to export an animation. Here is an animation I just completed in PuppyRay. And what I'll do is click Done, because I don't want to lose all these parameters. If I click the X up here, it would lose and reset next time I go back in. So I'm going to click Done. And now, first of all, of course, we want to preview it, scroll through it and see if everything is there. Looks pretty good. And what to save. So under the animation menu, you can save a couple of things. A quick memory dump with the header of the dog waffle animation format is DWA file. When you do that, you have a quick backup. You can later load it back into Howler and decide what to do with it next. Another thing you can do is to store it to disk. And that might be good because that automatically, it doesn't ask you where. So it's similar to the saving it, but it won't ask you with a dialog, which file path to give it, or which directory, which folder to save it in, and what name. It just automatically does that and goes to the temp folder. But it's on disk now, and so that means if the program were to crash during the next export, it would still be possible to recover this animation. Another thing you might want to do is save it as a sequence. Right? With this, you can save each frame as an image in a particular image format like PNG, so it's lossless, or JPEG if you don't mind it being lossy, but smaller file size. You could save it to Targa, TIFF, BMP. And so that's recommended in many cases because then you can easily identify each of the frames, and maybe some of the software you use thereafter allows you to identify each other frame, or 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 to do a time lapse or to do a fast forward. All sorts of reasons why you might prefer to work with image sequence. There's also Save AVI. I'll get back to that last. There is an export to media, which I recommend. And then animated GIF, why not? But not for this type of animation. And GIFs are not made for high quality images. I mean, they are high quality, but in its own way with limited number of colors. So for small images and few colors, yes, you might want to use it as an animated GIF. My recommendation is to export to media first. And the thing you want to keep there again is how many frames per second you want to have when this thing gets to play back from another program. So when you play it in Windows Media Player or whatever tool you use, what is the inherent playback rate, frames per second? I had it 24 here when I initially created it, or when I view it here, but that's not to say we could change that. So here's your last chance to change it. As far as what it's going to remember in the program, in the file. Any other program thereafter can do something different with it. They can ignore it, or they can use it, but they can also allow you to override it to play it back faster or slow it down again. And then here, the target bitrate. Now that's important. You shouldn't be just 800 kilobit per second. I would go to 12 in front, put 12 in front of that, or even 16. So you have 16 megabit per second. And then that way you have a fairly high quality. It's a bigger file, of course, but you'll get a better quality on that saving. It is lossy. MP4 is not lossless, at least not to my knowledge. So the format is MP4 by default. The file type here, I'm not going to override what I already did. I'm going to go 21 for my media. So I have a couple of other files that I will eventually want to all put together into a final presentation. This is 21, next one maybe 22, 23, etc. You can also click here if you want to give it a different path, save it somewhere else. But it's a good idea to establish once where you're saving it, and then as you're going one rendering after the other, it'll have that same path remembered, and it will make it so much easier for you to just keep saving those different snippets, those different pieces that ultimately you'll probably want to stitch together in a video editing program. There's also another format. There's a WMV. In fact, it came in 3 different generations. So we have WMV 1, 2, and 3. I rarely use these, but they're there if you want. And then you can save it. And saving that will go straight to that file, and never forget the next step, which is to double check and verify that it's actually good. All right, it looks like it's going through and saving it without any issue here, but you always want to then open it in a different player. Because here we're in Dogwaffle, we're able to see it, but will we be able to see it from another program? So you want to use this here, show. That will open it in whatever your default media player is for MP4 in this case. If you have AVI, if you saved it to AVI, it will have to be a media player that can play AVI files, etc. So this is good because this allows you to verify that yes, we didn't completely mess it up during the export. Sometimes it will happen. You may have an image that has some odd dimensions. The width or the height might be odd numbers. Right, so that's not going to work. Most of the AVIs will not work with that. The codecs, the compression codec will not accept anything that is odd numbers, and then oftentimes even an even number, like a multiple of 2 or multiple of 4, may not be enough. It needs to be specific dimensions for some of these codecs anyway. So that's a good one to double check. So we've done this. Now we can close this and see one more export, which is the AVI. And when you do AVI, you have the same thing essentially. You have this. You can give it a path. I'm going to call it, so it's not, it shows MP4 by default because it remembers the last one was an MP4 that we saved from the MP4 media save, but we need to make sure we rename it to AVI. And it's okay to have the same file name here. Right, it will just be a parallel file. Instead of MP4, it'll be a .avi. You can also go here to change it again to a different location. Then when you save it, it asks a few more parameters. I would not use full frame. If you want a full frame, it's going to be a big file. And frankly, you can do that with our initial option here to save the DWA format. Instead, I would go with Lagarif. It's an optional codec. You need to install it. There's also XVID, MPEG-4. There's a couple of others. Many of these I would not recommend because they are outdated, they're old, they are probably for very special resolutions only, and color depths and so on. My preference by far for AVI files is Lagarif. Look it up, it's a free codec from LeetCode. And the beauty of it is that it has a couple of really great features. What you do is you go to the configure option. It will remember these, so you don't have to do this every time. Every time you save an AVI, you don't have to do that. One thing I would not do is enable null frames. Right? If you don't know what a null frame is, just take my word for it. But I would not enable that. You want every frame as is. And then you have RGB or alpha. There's actually a couple of options here. You could have it with alpha. Now, we don't have an alpha channel that we export in our code, but other applications can do that. So that's potentially a great feature. And I don't know, maybe in the future we'll export the alpha too, because we can have an alpha channel. It can even be an animated alpha channel. And so you could actually save it to RGBA in theory. I don't know if we have the code doing that right now. So stick with RGB for now. Multi-threading, definitely, that will go faster if you're on a multi-threaded system. And who isn't these days, right? You're at least quad-core or octa-core or something like that. So enable that. And then prevent upsampling when decoding. Frankly, I have no idea whether that makes a difference. So I'm not checking that. I'm just leaving it. I think the default was not checked. And that's it. So now we go and save that. And it's a very fast export, right? The compression into this Lagarif codec is really fast. And it is lossless. That's one reason why I consider this a really good option, especially while you're looking for a format that you can still work with. It's a work format more than a, maybe an archival format, but not the production format. In the end, you'll publish it to a codec that is used by others. Many of the apps that I have locally will use it and will work with it. But if you upload an AVI that's with the Lagarif codec to YouTube, it will not understand it. At least in my experience in the past. I don't know, maybe they've changed and enhanced it to support that too. I would not send it to YouTube as an AVI anyway. I would say save it to MP4. And it does a much better job with that. So once you've saved it, again, don't forget this. You have to show it. If you show it and it turns out something's wrong, you will notice it here. For instance, it might look like it's playing, but it wouldn't be this beautiful picture. Instead, it might be gray and have a diagonal cut going across. That happened to me earlier today, and I noticed my dimensions on the image was actually not proper for the AVI export. It was not odd numbers, it was even numbers, but it still didn't have the right detail. It was like, I don't know, the width or the height was 1032 when it needed 1036 pixels or something like that. I forget what the numbers were exactly. But you do want to test that, because if you quit the program and you only saved it to AVI, and then it turns out the dimensions were bad or something went wrong with that export, you're screwed, right? You lost the ability to recover that. So it's always important. Why do you still have the ability here? After you export it to AVI, save it. Play it externally with the external viewer. After you export it to MP4, play it. Double check that it's all good. And really, if you have disk space and it's cheap enough these days, you could have an SSD drive that saves really quickly. I would also simply save the DWA file, the dog waffle animation file. So when you save to that, I don't know, I don't care where you save it, maybe documents there, and you can simply call it temp saved or something like that, .dwa if you want to be picky and detailed. Not DWA, dog waffle animation. And then you'll see this one is going pretty quick, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, done, right? And that's because I'm on an SSD drive. If you were on a traditional 72 RPM drive, it would be probably 10 times slower. But still, at least you have a good backup. And you can always reopen it from here, right? That's the purpose of saving it and reopening it if necessary. This one too, that was the stored copy. You can do more with that as well. There's a little pull down menu here. Careful that's a really big animation. It may not fit into the memory anymore. Once you have it going into the brush, it may need more memory because it also has an alpha channel on each frame. That may just not be the way to use that kind of scenario for a large animation. But the point is, you could actually use that as an animated swap. You could use it as an animated selection. And that's it. I'm going to close that. And thanks for watching. I think that's pretty much the intro, or the basics for animating, saving or exporting your animation. Right? Now, there's a lot of things you'll do again, and you say, oh, wait, maybe we can increase the focus here, or sharpen it, or blur it, or do a couple of other things. So save often. Save it in a number of formats. And actually, one thing that you can also do is save it while you're rendering in PuppyRay. And maybe that's the last one I need to cover here. Let me do this. I'm going to show you how I finish this and continue on to the next, because I have a whole animation here. And if I go to the very last frame, I'm at the end of this canyon, and I want to continue right from this point. So the next animation will be another 200 or 300 frames or 600 frames, but I want it to continue right there. The way I do this is, first I go to that last frame, although I don't really necessarily have to, but it's a good idea. I go to the last frame and I free the animation. I want to free as much memory as possible. I still have this image here. Now, the original I had stored, I can put it back in here. The swap image still has the color map. That's this one here. So if I switch to the swap image, right here, S, if I switch to that, you can see it here. If it's not there for some reason, put it back in, and then switch back to the main image. So I'm looking at the main image you see here in the title bar, 100% main. If I switch, it's the swap. That's the swap image. And so now in the main image, I can create a new animation. Create. And it's going to be, again, 678 frames. I'm lazy. I'm just ripping this out of my hand. 678, and it doesn't seem to be like too big. The 2 gigabyte is roughly what it can take, and this is about 2 gigabytes, and it didn't show me a warning yet. If I give it way too many, let's see if I add another, then it says limit exceeded, right? So, but this might still work if I'm lucky, and sometimes I'm just borderline and it will crash. So careful there. Let's see. Still good. So I can go now across this animation. I still have the swap image contain the background color. And so what I'm going to do now is go back into the PuppyRay transform, PuppyRay GPU. And first thing I'll do is I'll uncheck the anti-aliasing because it takes so long. Each rendering, each frame gets anti-aliased 43 times here. I might want to actually, I didn't remember that I had it this low. I usually go for 100, so I'm going to go 128. But you want to make sure before you make any changes that you uncheck the anti-aliasing, because otherwise it's going to take forever when you just move it a little bit, and it moves it 2 or 3 times at least, right? So if you now scrub through that, you can see the original position in low quality, since I don't have the anti-aliasing enabled right now. Go to the end of this animation. That's where we left the prior. The end of the animation was here. And what I want to do is ditch all of the keyframes. Right here, clear the keys. Right? So that's the current position. I can now go here to the first frame and it's still that same current position. Now it's a slightly different look because the water is animated. You can see here it's moving some waves. So as I'm scrubbing through that, the landscape remains the same, but the water moves. And now I'm going to go add this as my new keyframe. And I can go forward a little bit. Let's say in the animation, I want to go here and make sure I'm in the move mode, move camera, and move forward. Right? And maybe with the right button, move up a little bit. And maybe here I can turn or rotate the camera. Maybe this way, tilt it like this. Let's see if we can induce some motion sickness here. Next frame, I'm going to go here, and of course I need to keep moving. And I remember the thing I said, I wanted to show you how you can save these frames once I'm starting the rendering, when I'm starting to render them. Right, something like this here. Almost done here. Let me finish this quick and then I'll show you where the trick is to save it while rendering. Right, so that's something you might want to do. Let's see, where's the water going? Is that a dead end? It looks like it's a dead end. Oh yeah, I didn't no, wait. Oh no, here it goes, over there. Alright, so I'm gonna keep going there. And maybe tilt a little bit more, something like that. And then we go to the very end. Right button and forward. The next animation I'll probably sling back. Next animation I'll probably continue up here. But so for now, in fact, you know what? Let's kind of land on one of these rocks right there. And look down on it. And move down on it. There. And so. Something like that. Maybe wide angle, a little bit more wide angle, there you go. And maybe down a little bit closer to the ground, there you go. That's good. Alright, so we have this last keyframe. So now we have an animation prediction here. A couple of keyframes going along. How do we set this up so it's actually going to render, and each frame as it gets rendered will be saved? There's an option here, right down here at the bottom above the render button. You see save sequence, right? So the entire sequence will be saved. You can say where you want it. I'll just leave that alone. By default, it's the folder with the, well, actually let's click it. It's the temp folder, the Howler temp folder. So I'm just going to go and save it there. And it will create an image sequence, puppy render. Let's say, what's today? June 13. I'm going to put that, something like that. June, let's spell it out. June 13. And then that way we have an image sequence of these files. I think there will be PNG files. I'm not 100% sure. It's probably an option somewhere that can be configured. Maybe not. But the whole point is to have images frame by frame as they are getting rendered. Once one is rendered, before it goes to the next one, it will save a copy of it there. So make sure you check this box if that's important. Right? And then at this point, you might also see if maybe it's time to change the type of rock, do a render. So that's without any bump map, maybe some fractal. I really like that riverbed, but there's a few others you might like. Some pitted appearance for some type of surface that looks really good. The mud bank, the purlin noise. Maybe that's great for lava, magma, lava beds. And then there's some tech that looks more like some alien civilization building or something. Let's stay with the riverbed. That one has a good mix of very natural formations. And so I'm going to keep that, and then I'm going to go to set the anti-aliasing. I'm done selecting the anti-aliasing here. Now, when you enable it, you will notice it will re-render. It doesn't do that always. I don't know exactly where the trigger is, but there is a good chance it's going to do that. So be patient, wait for that before you do anything else. You don't want to start accumulating additional motion events or redraw events while it's already rendering, and then you lose control of how many more are in the queue and you have to wait even longer. Even longer, nobody wants to wait. So we are done. This one is ready. Let's go and animate. And we will have a sequence of images saved as we go and animate. Let's just keep the default parameters and go. Right, so now frame by frame we have the new animation getting out. Alright, thanks for watching. We'll be posting that on YouTube channel and talk about it. If you have any questions, hit me up. Thanks.